Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And welcome to How to Catch a Big Green Fish, how impact companies can sell to enterprise. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a director of programs at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So check out those links and resources in the chat. We have a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Firstly, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. Secondly, we're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event, so please submit those questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We'll try our best to get to them all. Now, none of what we do here at the center would be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We're grateful and humbled by their contributions and hope you are too. Before we get started, I'm going to launch a couple polls to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how all of you are doing today. We use this information to guide the programs that we do here at the center. The first poll, how are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic and a little bit of survival mode? We use this to provide the additional resources and support for you, the entrepreneurs in our community. So I'm going to let this run for a little bit. We don't want to delay too much because we've got a lot of great stuff today. All right, I'm going to end this poll, share those results. Thanks for letting us know how you're doing. Looks like optimism is in the lead, but little survival mode and anxiety out there. Hopefully, our content today will help alleviate some of that anxiety. The second poll, what's keeping you up at night? This helps guide the future programs that we provide for you, the entrepreneurs, and our community. So let us know. Ooh, looks like sales is in the lead, which is our topic today, which I love. All righty. I don't want to run this too long, but thank you all for voting. Looks like we've got Nashville, Puerto Rico, Atlanta, Maryland, Montreal, Canada. Welcome, welcome. Chicago, New York, Texas. Alrighty, I'm going to end this poll. Share these results. Looks like sales is indeed in the lead today. No surprise there, but we got a good mix of sales and finance. So I'm going to stop sharing that and jump right in. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome in the chat to our moderator for our conversation this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what time zone you're in. We have Shannon Seart, Lead ESG Advisor at Nasdaq. Shannon, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Colin. I'm pleased to, should I go on to introducing the panelists?
Yep, we're good.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I am pleased to introduce our panelists for today. Joining us is Daniela Ozio, who is the CEO and founder of Kloopify. Daniela, will you please give an intro?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Shannon, for the intro. My name is Daniela. I am the CEO, co-founder of Kloopify. We are a climate action platform for procurement. I'm an ex-procurement professional myself, so I know firsthand both of the exciting and challenging things that happen in the world of procurement and also in the world of sales. So I'm excited to get started on this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Next to our panel conversation is Wendy Mann-Flores. Wendy is the Senior Lead Program Manager for Supplier Diversity and the Vice President of Corporate Procurement at Bank of the West.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here today with you. I have been with Bank of the West for about a year and a half. Bank of the West was recently acquired by BMO Harris, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Excited to be here and share some great information with you all today. Thank you.
Excellent. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Shervin Rafsanjani. He is from the Public Sector and Digital Alliances and the National Transformation Partnerships at Microsoft.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here, and unfortunately don't have as good a background as Daniela does. I'm been at Microsoft for 15 years now, and I've got a strong background in negotiations and selling, but I'm currently working on good ESG projects around the world.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's launch into the meat of this conversation because we do have a lot of content to get through today. Daniela, I'm going to start with you. You are an entrepreneur in the impact space with a background in procurement from the other side of the table. For some of those in the audience who are unfamiliar with the process, can you talk a little bit how the procurement process works from the buyer side?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great question. So procurement can feel many times fuzzy because there's a concept of relationship management plus balancing the internal processes that an organization has. So if you think about procurement from a large scale and an enterprise stage, there are many phases. First, most of the time, it comes with a business request. The business comes or the organization has identified that there's a challenge or an opportunity that they can work with the supplier and supply chain. Then they'll bring that in, do an evaluation. Sometimes they'll do an RFI to really understand what are the different opportunities that exist. That usually follows with an RFP, which is a request for proposal inside of the organization. And that's where we're really trying to understand what is the difference between all of the different suppliers kind of bidding on a contract. And then it falls into the negotiation. And then once the negotiations happen, then you go into the awarding process. And many times after it's been awarded, you're setting up processes that help you with the strategic relationship management, where you and your client or your supplier get together and just make sure that everything that you're saying in the contract is being valued. Historically, we've really evaluated suppliers using price and quality as our two main factors on awarding contracts. But now, and even in kind of spirit of this conversation around ESG and sustainability, procurement professionals are starting to integrate price, quality, and sustainability. So that is now one of the additional decision makers that gets introduced during the procurement process. So if there's one thing that I can add, I'd say, we're seeing this evolution. If there is something that you're offering that's above industry when it comes to sustainability, make sure you are included in there. Make sure that you have that as a highlight point, because that can be one of the things that gets you or wins you a contract.
Excellent. Thank you. And I wanted to pull on a thread a little bit around those other variables that may weigh into the decision making. I think one that's starting to come up in the US is diversity. And Wendy, I'd like to ask you, supplier diversity is becoming increasingly important for big corporates in the United States. How are you seeing this feed into the procurement process?
Yes, absolutely. It sure is. So the focus on spending money with diversity certified companies, it's growing exponentially year over year in the US and globally, actually. And not only is it the right thing to do, there's a huge economic impact involved when you spend money with diverse small businesses. The generation of jobs, the tax revenue that you bring into a community, and the nimbleness and innovation that a smaller, diverse supplier brings to the table is huge for supply chain. So when a company conducts an RFP, like Daniela was talking about, now a major component for most companies that have a supplier diversity program is diversity. They want to know if you are a diverse supplier, they want to know that up front. And you're going to get credit for that. The RFP process has different weights in different segments: price, schedule, quality. But also, if you're not a diverse company, if you can commit to subcontracting part of the project with a diverse subcontractor, you're going to get great points for that as well. So keep that in mind. It's not only diverse companies, it's also about companies that maybe are large, non-diverse, but they're doing the right thing. They're partnering with these smaller, diverse companies. So also, most companies have a diverse spend goal, and working with diverse suppliers is going to help them meet those goals.
Excellent. If you don't mind, I do have a follow-on question to that. So let's say you are a small company, you are diverse. how do you communicate that to a large corporate? Are there certain certifications, or is there certain data or metrics you should disclose? How do you communicate that you could be a supplier that would meet perhaps some of those diverse spend goals?
Sure. So we always recommend to get your certification. If you are a woman-owned, ethnic minority, LGBTQ, veteran, disabled owned business, it is so worth the time that it takes to get your certification. There's a process, there's an application process that you go through to become certified. But once you have that certification, it can help you in so many ways. It opens doors for you with these RFPs. It gives you exposure to other corporate members of the organization. It adds your company to databases that procurement specialists go out and look for diverse suppliers in certain spaces. So depending on what classification you are, there's different steps you take, but for the most part, the same steps are taken no matter what classification. So there's an application that you fill out. There's actually a site visit that the organization comes out and visits your company to make sure that you are who you say you are. Your financial records, your organizational bylaws. So it is a process, but once you get that certification, it will just help give you a better presence when you are competing for these projects.
And Wendy, if I can add just one thing here, especially as a startup, we're like limited with resources, and any help we can get is always a plus. If you are a diverse founder, reach out to your local universities or the local chapters of the certifications that you're trying to get, because many times they have resources dedicated to help you getting that certification. Because as Wendy mentioned, it is a process, and it does mean that you have to dedicate time to it. But if you, for example, I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you can go to the University of Pittsburgh, you can go to Carnegie Mellon, you can go to Duquesne, and all of those schools have dedicated programs, small business and startup programs, to help founders navigate the process and help them streamline the application so it doesn't take that much effort. Because I echo what Wendy said in the sense that if you have, your WeBank certification or NMSDC or whatever veteran owned, those kinds of stamps really help you get noticed during the RFP process.
Right. And also along with the certification comes the benefits of working with an organization like NMSDC or WeBank. You're always exposed to opportunities for networking. You're meeting, potential clients, other diverse suppliers. So, there's a lot of training also that these organizations offer to small diverse suppliers.
Excellent. Thank you. I love it. We're getting into tactics and into process right off the bat. And so shifting to dive even deeper into process, Shervin, understanding a customer's procurement process and timelines is really important. How does one spot a delay tactic in procurement versus a real process?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think the first and foremost thing that people need to be aware of is that it's not in the best interest of a procurer to delay the process if they want to buy the thing that you're selling, right? So the very first thing that people will look at is you're a team and you're trying to get over the line. Even if you're negotiating the hell out of it and trying to make sure that you get the best deal for yourself as a buyer, right? You're still trying to get over the line. So if you sense that the other side is not trying to get a deal done, that is your first red flag for a delay tactic, right? I think the second one is some lack of specificity on the blockers, right? So if a buyer is able to give you feedback clearly and concisely on what is stopping the next step of the process of happening, then that's probably not a delay tactic. If they are, however, being more foggy about it or holding back on information, that's where you start sort of feeling, okay, is this a process issue, or am I just not really getting anywhere? And the reality is, as you're looking at sort of the cycles within a large enterprise that is doing procurement, right, and you know that they're going to go through budget cycles, if they miss budget cycles and your product, they told you that they wanted your product or your service, but they missed a budget cycle, you should start being a little bit concerned about what are they trying to tell you with that. Are they trying to say, well, it's not high enough up on our priorities that we're going to actually follow up on this? And I think the other thing I would definitely do if I sense that there is a delay tactic going on, especially on the procurement side, is to find that other angle into the same company and to ask the question about, well, what does the process look like at your company? Most enterprises have very similar processes for procurement. So if you feel like you're not sort of moving along on the process and they haven't given you a clear reason as to why your product or service does not actually comply with what they're trying to buy, then you really should be finding other places to look for information as to why you're not moving on. And frankly, potentially just break it off from your side. And there's always value in coming to a close quickly and not trying to, put in too many cycles and throwing good money after bad money, right? When it comes to sales in investments and trying to sort of drive more and more if the other side is really not responding.
Excellent, thank you. Talking more about just general strategies, RFPs, let's move on to the RFP conversation. And Daniela, I'd like to direct this question towards you. RFPs can be a really complicated and complex landscape to navigate. Do you have any advice for founders on how to find the right RFPs, how to overcome visibility challenges in the supply chain? And are there any solutions you're starting to see implemented?
Yeah, so RFPs have historically and will continue to be complicated kind of things to navigate. One thing I would recommend is many times companies are looking for innovation and there might not be a full, strict RFP out. So if you have a customer, identify who your end user, who your decision makers are inside that organization, and try to begin building those relationships before you even get to the RFP. Because if you're waiting until the RFP, you really are competing without having any foundational level of interaction beforehand. And even just as a point of contact, many times when there's innovation, there may not be an RFP out there for your type of innovation, because you're really at the cutting edge of what's coming out. So make sure that you are going after those people even before a formal RFP is made, so that once that need has been identified and they need to go through that formal process, it can almost be, I wouldn't say tailored to your solution, but because they know what you offer, the RFP is going to be much more tailored to what you've already kind of taught them about. You've given them that foundation to build a really strong RFP where you will be able to succeed in. So start to identify who your decision makers are before the RFP even launches. Don't wait. And the other thing to kind of build off of what Shervin said earlier, which is many times you just need to, if you're not hearing no all the time, you're not asking enough. You're not going out there and really putting yourself out there enough. You should be hearing no all the time. And then once you hear that no, you should be dissecting and understanding, why are you getting that no? Is it because it's off budget? Is it because the value prop isn't coming across right? Is it because, it isn't the right timing? That no is so much more valuable, and many times more valuable than a yes, because then you get to tailor and change your provokes. So I like to think about it in if I give you this, then you'll give me that. And if the first part of that provoke isn't a good, you can't make that trade-off, then maybe it's your job is to go back and adjust what you are selling and how you're selling it and what you're offering, and seeing how you can move from a no to a yes. Many times a no is the fastest way to a yes. And as startups, we don't have the runway. We don't have the time to build these long and strong relationships the way that sales has been kind of run in the past. We really are fighting time. So use that provoke strategy, because selling to somebody that wants to buy from you is way easier than to selling to somebody and trying to convince them that you're the right fit. And let's be honest, the world is big. The amount of opportunities, your top of your funnel should be always full with hundreds of opportunities, because the likelihood you then got to move them down the funnel. So always be filling the top of the funnel, always be starting with the provokes of if I give you this, then can we give you that, and see if this is a trade of value that's worth enough for that company to go through, and begin the engagement pre-RFP. Begin targeting the people that are setting up the RFP. So when that launches, they've heard your name, they know who you are, they have your value prop, and maybe even tailored the RFP to some of the features and functionalities that your unique technology or solution provides.
If I may pile in on top of that, there's something you said, Danielle. I think what a lot of us do as an automatic sort of movement is to think, oh, I'm a startup and I need to have a couple of big logos as my references. Getting those really big, like, whatever they are, the very, very large companies of the world, right? Getting them onto your reference list is a really, really long and arduous process. I would really strongly recommend thinking more about concrete wins with proper technology and solutions, right? Rather than a wishy-washy kind of thing just for the reference, where you've spent a lot of time trying to get that name on there. You're much better off showing concrete things that actually work. And you're much better off if you got that funnel, like you will spend a lot more time trying to get company XYZ, in the Forbes 100, right, to buy your thing, versus maybe 20 others who make you more money and who will actually concretely close the deal and move on and be able to put out a reference and an actual architecture solution in there.
Yeah, and add a case study. Make a case study after those wins, and then use those case studies to really make your sales process even simpler. Because it's like, look what I did with, even if it's not a big company, but it could be industry adjacent, or it can just help tell the story. Just make sure those quick wins can actually strengthen your case when you're going after these large organizations, and make it possible for them to say yes and to bet on you, because you've got all of this proof behind you as well.
I might add great information from both of you, but I just want to emphasize how important it is for small businesses to do your homework and understand who you're selling to, understand what their business model is, who are your competitors, who are their biggest suppliers, because sometimes it's just not feasible because of scalability for a small company to go into a big corporation and get a contract right off the bat. So if you know who their main primes are, you can start relationships with those companies and be, a second tier supplier. Get your foot in the door that way, understand the business model, learn about their systems. And that's really a way to help you grow and understand how can you, continue to perpetuate that momentum so you can one day be a prime yourself. And then the last thing I wanted to add is, when you do get those no's, ask your procurement person or your category manager for an autopsy of your RFP. They'll be more than happy to bring you in or, have a call with you to explain to you, what, this is where you could have sharpened your pencil more. This is where we see that you could improve the next time you do, go out for bid for anything. So those are a couple of things that you should keep in mind.
That was a lot of great content. I actually want to pick out a few themes and dive a bit deeper, if you don't mind. Daniela, you kicked off this fantastic conversation about talking about provokes in order to get a rapid response to kind of iterate rapidly. We talk about corporations like as an entity, but you're provoking an individual at the corporation. Who are the individuals that you want to target for that rapid feedback? Are they procurement officers? Are they folks in the business units? I guess, like, who are the individuals that you should be targeting, or do you need to target multiple people simultaneously in order to get rapid response and feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is really a unique to your business. You've got to understand who is the sales, who is going to be the decision maker and the user who is feeling this pain inside of the organization. Because many times, if you think about procurement is oftentimes a supporting function inside of these organizations. Sometimes it lives inside of supply chain. Sometimes it's its own entity and kind of goes around and supports all of the business units inside of these companies. But procurement many times is not the one that you'll be selling to unless you're selling a procurement solution. Because many times the people who are feeling the pain and who are going to give procurement that business request is going to be the people inside of the organization, inside of the business units that have personally identified that this is something that they need. Then they involve procurement, and procurement adds a level of structure and a level of oversight into the buying process. So unless you are targeting specifically you are a procurement solution for procurement professionals, you may want to think about who is going to be the user, who is feeling the pain, and who's going to bring this business request to procurement to launch an RFP. So really understand who is your user, who is your customer, who are your decision makers inside of the company, who are your champions and influencers, who are your connectors, because all of those different roles inside of a company exist. And you want to, if as a startup, you want to get as close as possible to the decision maker who feels the pain as much as possible. And when I think when we're really talking about provokes, I put it in a simple term of, if I give you this, then will you give me that? But it's really just all businesses is an exchange of value. So is what I'm providing and offering you valuable enough, but for you to also get rid of some of your value, which is money. So you're always kind of testing, is what I'm offering valuable enough to make that transition. And the only time that you'll really get an answer of if this, then yes, is if you're asking the right person, the person who can either sign off on it or can escalate it to the right decision maker. And so that's kind of my thoughts around really tailoring it to the right person inside the organization. Many times that's not procurement.
Sure, Vin. So building upon that, and Wendy, you both kind of touched on this. So we have the understanding now that the procurement is a function many times within a larger corporation that is helping many other business units who have the needs. And I know we've talked about this in previous conversations, but procurement frequently has like verified suppliers. And Wendy, you kind of hinted at this about being able to find their primes. And Shervin, you've touched on this before in conversation around different strategies to overcome, I guess, kind of approved supplier certification lists, et cetera, within corporations in order to ease the transaction. Could both of you elaborate on that, like different strategies someone could deploy?
Sure. So I came from the utility industry. I was with a major utility for 13 years. And one of the things that we would do every year was something called a Tier 2 Institute. And we would invite all of our primes, and then we would put the invitation out there to diverse, smaller suppliers to come for half a day workshop and meet these primes and talk about how can you collaborate with each other, to do business with us. So I would say definitely look at the supplier diversity, whoever's managing the supplier diversity program in the company you want to work for. See if they have events like that. Also, industry-specific events are really good places to go and network. So whether it's like with your local chapter of the NMSDC or WeBank, anything that brings companies together is always a good place for you to go and network, honestly. And that's how you're going to build your web of people and create opportunities for yourself.
And I'd look at it from a slightly more tactical side, right? So prior to working for Microsoft, I worked for multiple smaller companies selling, systems and system integration services and this kind of stuff. And when I was not ready or listed or in the good books of a large enterprise that I wanted to sell to, the strategy would always be to try to find a partner who was. So looking at some of the really large enterprises, right, due to the fact that they are so big and that they have procurement rules which are stopping them, or, it's good governance, right, to have procurement rules that are stopping them from just buying anywhere, right, and using their credit card online to buy stuff. What it means is that getting sort of into that listed group of suppliers can be complicated unless you have already convinced someone in the business that your solution is absolutely unique and is needed. It's very difficult to take that step. And sometimes in order to reduce the cycle, the best thing you can do is to find a partner. And I would obviously not go to a competitor, but you can find a partner who's adjacent to the work that you do, or a consultancy partner, right? These are the two that I would probably work with. And if I've got a solution in the tech space, for example, and I'm looking for a large enterprise that I want to sell to, I might go to one of the typical sort of consultancy partners like the EYs or the KPMGs of the world, and specifically talk to them about how do you bring that solution in. That there is a danger with that, just to be clear. There's always a danger with that, and I don't want to suggest that that's your first sort of port of call, but there is a middle ground probably to be found in figuring out who's the right partner in the right spot. And at the end of the day, and Wendy touched on that very clearly, is like building your network of people. It's people who make the difference. So I realized, Daniela, that if you hear a big consultancy firm, you sort of worry potentially, but at the same time, it really depends on who you get in that group. So you might have a contact, you might have a group of people that you know, and then you say, there is this one person at EY or at Microsoft, right, who will help you to take that relationship from where you are today with this enterprise where you have no formal relationship, and to take that step and say, I can run business through that person and address that company. The one thing I would really, really recommend is having very clear agreements and structures before going into business, right? So what you want to do is you want to say, look, yes, please help me join in, and please help me get to that company. Please introduce me, please, and I'm fine to have the first deal run through you, but make sure you've contractually agreed on what happens after that. The upside is, a big consultancy firm might be your multiplier, and you might end up selling 100 times what you thought, because someone at the consultancy firm goes, oh my God, that's an amazing solution, I'm going to go and pitch it to every enterprise. That's the upside. The downside is you don't have a clear agreement, and they sort of pull you in, but then they want to have a piece of everything you do and don't really do any work for it. So you have to sort of figure out on both sides. And it's always a bit of a game to play, of course. But if you need to reduce your sales cycle, that's an option.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think that there's such an opportunity to work with consulting companies. We are currently evaluating that option ourselves, because there's just great partnerships that can happen, given that consulting companies, for the most part, are not technology companies. So they look for technology solutions to partner with to be able to go to market together. I echo what you say in the sense, though, make sure that you have a solid agreement in place. You understand what you are agreeing to, because at the end of the day, these consulting firms have billions of dollars. And if it's worth it, they can reverse engineer anything that you make. So make sure that you are setting yourself up for success, and that you're going into this with your eyes open and aware of what you're getting into. But if you do it right, many times it can be a very fruitful relationship for both sides.
Excellent. I think that was, I really enjoyed that conversation. I feel like we walked everyone through in detail some of the things to consider, which is fantastic. Shervin, I want to move back to you a little bit. We talked about diversity, the move for more diverse supply chains in the US. Are you seeing similar trends in Europe? If not, do you think that will happen in the near future? Or are there other kind of value proposition variables that Europe's focusing on in terms of optimizing for their supply chain?
It's a good question, and I see that Anna Orenstein actually asked that question in the chat as well, or in the Q&A. So first of all, I think there's a difference between regulation and a trend, right? So if I look at the CSRD, the CSR directive that has just come out in the European Union, for example, there's no regulation that requires a company that is headquartered in Europe to buy from any particular grouping, right? Regardless of whether it's a minority-owned business or a business that is doing positive impact in any sort of space, right? It's the fiscal responsibility of the company to do certain things, and then there's reporting on ESG, but there's no, additional requirements there. So, having said that, what I'm seeing slowly develop, and I think the UK is probably going faster than the rest of Europe, right? And for these purposes, we will still say that the UK is part of Europe. We're seeing groupings similar to the ones that Wendy was talking about being created, and that there are support organizations, whether they are individual entities and NGOs that are supporting, for example, minority-owned businesses, or whether they are actually, enterprise groupings or industrial groupings that are doing that, right? I mean, if I look at Microsoft's program, right, that we work with, right, the Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, that is effectively something like that. It's basically supporting entrepreneurs with positive impact. And inside of that, we do have a particular view on, for example, supplier diversity, but especially diversity in the startup space. And then we think about how do we, for example, put out programs to skill people in underserved communities. So those things are happening. But I think what the danger is that whilst big corporations in Europe are potentially looking at that supplier diversity as well, the danger is to hope too much that that's going to help you get an in, without having, without having actually convinced someone senior at one of those companies that there is value in doing the right thing by buying from a, for example, minority-owned business. So if you see what I mean, you need to sort of find the balance between understanding that regulation isn't going to help you at this point. And I don't know whether there's real regulation. There's certainly pressure, but regulation inside, outside the US, in the rest of the world is very, very lax on the topic, because you have a financial responsibility rather than a responsibility to do anything else. But after that, the pressure is mounting, and I'm hoping that Europe will follow suit with the US, where more and more industrial pressure will happen, that diverse-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, businesses for people who have recently migrated to Europe. These are the kind of things where I'm hoping we will see more buying from those companies.
Yeah, if I can add to that too, and just kind of build off of what's being said, is that a lot of the times, even in the US, these requirements or these recommendations for diverse business isn't just a social responsibility from these organizations, but it actually leads many times to better performance, higher revenue, and business growth. So from I used to work at DuPont, and I was part of their diverse spend group. And many times our diverse suppliers were the best suppliers that we had. I mean, they really came through, they delivered. But if the key being that you have to show up and have the value, right? You have to show up and bring, a good business solution and something that's going to solve a problem for that organization, because you aren't just going to get business because you're a diverse or minority supplier. This is just a nice kind of cherry on top that adds to the value overall that you're going to bring to the organization. And it's the same thing around ESG, right? We're here talking about how to get the big green fish. Well, at the end of the day, part of the reason that businesses are moving towards sustainability, yes, is regulatory pressure, but it's also because it's the right business thing to do. You're seeing that a study from McKinsey showed that sustainable companies and companies that have integrated sustainability into how they do business tend to have about a 6 to 9% higher profit margins. So there is money to be made by doing the right thing. It's either a carrot or the stick. You can wait for regulatory pressures to come down and force you to do it, or you can be a first mover.
If I may pile in on top, I love it, Daniela. And I think that's exactly also the point about if you go into supplier diversity topics, right? I think that's a super selling argument, right? Is to go back and to say, hey, to be clear, right? Your company does better with higher levels of diversity and inclusion internally, right? And that's proven across the board over the last 10 years. We've got loads and loads of results across the whole world that show that diversity drives results, right? Why not also in your supply chain? And if you haven't been thinking about it, you should be thinking about it. And I think that's a really good argument. I think Europe is behind the US on this.
That's an excellent transition. So there's kind of two more themes I want to try to hit on before we have to conclude the panel and go to Q&A. So one of them is storytelling and how to communicate your impact and your value through storytelling, especially taking that green lens or ESG centric lens, environmental, social, and governance centric lens, for those not familiar with that acronym. Wendy, I'm going to direct this question to you, but everyone else is free to contribute. Do you have any tips or tricks on how entrepreneurs should leverage storytelling, leverage their background in order to communicate impact?
Absolutely. So any information that sets your company apart from your competition should definitely be shared during the RFP process. For example, in the CSR space, does your company have internal programs? Do they have a supplier diversity program? Any program that make a positive impact on the communities that they're serving. What is your workplace culture like? Do you have ERG groups? Do you have an internal DEI workforce development program? What green initiatives do you have in place? And anything that you can share during the RFP process that really makes you stand out is going to be so helpful to you.
Excellent. Shervin, Danielle, anything else to add in terms of, or do you have any anecdotes of any compelling storytelling that you've seen in terms of communicating impact that helped to kind of, switch decision-making maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all want to feel good, right? I mean, that's where we all come from, right? And I think the opportunity that founders and startups have today is to bring an emotional pitch in that maybe a larger enterprise can't do, right? As a Microsoft employee, it's very difficult to go and pitch, Microsoft Office in an emotional way today, right? We do all kinds of things, but that is not really the way we lead, right? Because it's an established product. Whereas if you come from a startup perspective and you can say, hey, I have the opportunity here for you as an enterprise to do the right thing effectively, right? By buying from a sustainable, small, local startup, one of the many, many points that you can bring in. And I can say that I can demonstrate to you, because I have, a relatively clear size, and I can show you the impact that I'm having today. I can demonstrate to you the impact that you will have if you buy from my company and buy my solution, right? And I'm taking this and working with a small company, that you can actually take that and put that onto the balance, the scales of your solution, right? And not only have the solution itself speak for itself, if you see what I mean. I'm trying to sort of get to the emotional part of it. So if I say to you, I saw someone in the chat saying, I have a solution that supports like people with medical bed sores, right? If I can come from a small place and I can say, I know where this is coming from. I know about the actual problem because I've been involved in the problem, and I can bring it to you and show you that I'm made a solution that's very, very specific to that topic. And I can go to whatever the buying platform is it a hospital, and I can say, here is your option to do the right thing and buy from a small startup, rather than going and buying from a giant company that might only do 50% of what I do. That emotional level will also help the enterprise people feel good about buying the right thing. And actually, I think that you can, even to the point of procurement, you can actually pick people off with that topic, right? You can actually sort of appeal to their emotional state and say, this is why you should do it, not just because it's financially the right thing to do, but also because it's the right thing to do.
Excellent.
I would like to just add, diversity doesn't guarantee contracts. Being a diverse supplier makes you a more well-rounded business partner. And you know, the actual RFP process is pretty straightforward as far as how companies are graded. Each component has a different weight. So if you are diverse, you're going to get the maximum amount of points in the diversity component, but companies aren't going to just pay for diversity. So just keep that in mind. You have to set yourself apart, and not only being diverse and small, but something else you need to bring to the table. And I always tell people that if you're passionate about what you're doing and you're passionate about your company, that will come through when you're talking to potential clients. So it's really important to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And if we're talking about sustainability, right? If we're talking about sustainability in the procurement process and leveraging that during the procurement process, you know, in the world of ESG, we are really focusing in the world of the regulatory space. We're focusing on these things called scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, right? And if you think about scope 3 emissions, which is your entire value chain, so upstream and downstream emissions, one thing that if you are a material company or a products company, or you're selling a good, a physical good, one thing that you could use to differentiate yourself is how are you better from an ESG sustainability, from a carbon impact, from a water usage, from some of these key metrics that are being tracked inside of organizations. How do you outperform the industry using those metrics? And if you can use that data, that will have a way for you to get extra points, as many organizations are really struggling to wrap their minds around how are they going to reduce primarily their scope 3 reductions, which is at Kloopify, we have this saying, you are what you eat, you are what you buy. For organizations, it's the exact same thing. They want to understand what they're putting into their organization's, you know, system, the same way that we want to understand what we're putting into our bodies. And, you know, and looking at nutritional value sheets, is it going to help me, make me feel happy? Is it going to make me feel of energy, et cetera? So one way that you can differentiate yourself is just having that data available and making it part of your pitch when you're trying to sell, especially as a sustainability company, and especially around trying to get how to catch a big green fish.
Maybe I'll just add, because Raj asked in the questions, right, how do you demonstrate that you're a sustainable company? What are the KPIs that procurement is looking for? I think the point there is you should be looking at what your customer needs to report on. If your customer must report, for example, at the moment, most customers are reporting scope 1, scope 2, and don't know how to report scope 3 emissions. If you can help them along those lines and say, look, I can give you the emissions data for my product and my portion, I can help you to therefore achieve your reporting requirements versus your regulators, right? And versus your stakeholders, be they the shareholders or your customers, that's how you really catch them. That's how you really help them out. And I think that's where you're going, Daniela. And I think that's the whole point, is to say, if you're going to bring data, make that data relevant for your customer. So don't just build your own thing and say, you know, I can do 47 widgets. Go back and say, how does it actually change your KPIs to your customer?
Excellent. Actually, I wanted to transition into the Q&A session. So Shervin, you start directing us there already. So that is one question down. We have another question from Rita asking about a supplier. Is there a supplier's platform in the corporate world to list your business?
Probably a million.
Yeah. There are a lot, but I will say there are a lot of platforms really industry specific. So if you're in construction, there's a platform for you. If you're in materials, there's a platform for you. So kind of maybe do some research and find out which platforms are the top ones in your industry where you can list yourself. And then if you think about it, you know, we talked about this from a supplier diversity perspective as well. When you get certified through those processes, you also get listed on their databases. So as organizations are looking to see if they can invite a smaller, diverse supplier into their RFP process. Those are the databases that they're going to be reaching out to and see if any company inside those databases meets those RFP needs. And then if you're thinking about it from a sustainability perspective, there are actually platforms as well that are dedicated to elevating sustainable businesses. And again, those are more industry specific. So look for the ones that are industry specific, because as organizations go out, and as an ex-procurement professional myself, where I would go out and look for others that we could invite to bids, my first thing is I would Google or search, use any type of search engine and be like, what suppliers, what supplier platform, how can I get this information? If I'm Googling it, you should Google it too, or search for it as well, and be able to come back and see what's on there and see if you can cross paths with the procurement professional that is looking for a solution like yours.
Yeah, and I will add that it is so important when you're approaching a potential client and you're sending information, your capability statement, list on there what certifications you hold, whether they're a diversity certification or a sustainability certification. It will be so helpful to whoever you're reaching out to. It will save us the pain of Googling and trying to research to see, what is this company all about? So the more forthcoming you are in your capability statement and the more information you share upfront will be very helpful too.
There's a question in here related to certifications. We talked about diversity certifications. Are there other certifications that are required for startups?
I don't know personally of any that are specific to startups and certifications that you need to get as a startup, but I will speak on what I do know is that there are a lot of ESG or environmental certifications out there. Make sure you do your research before you go through the process of getting a certification. Make sure you really validate that this is something that would provide value or that your end customer is looking for. Because a lot of the times certifications and eco labels and labels in general are starting to get really a negative connotation because it can lead to some greenwashing. And greenwashing is where you claim sustainability progress when you really haven't made any. And you're just really catering to the buyer who will spend more money on sustainable goods and services. So you're going to see this big transition from only using eco labels to maybe getting the eco labels that are third-party certified. So make sure that's part of the process. Plus have some supplementary data, like how Shervin was saying earlier around if your company that you're selling to is interested in carbon, make sure you include if yours is, less carbon emitting than your competitors. If it's water, talk about your water usage. If it's methane, just kind of tailor your sales pitch to what your customer is looking for. But keep an eye out for those certifications that are going to lose some of that sparkle as we transition away from only relying on those.
I think, first of all, I think you're 100% right, Daniela. And I think it's very much like the food certifications, right? Where, at some point you sort of look at it and you go, oh, it's got some label on it. You don't really know whether that's worth anything anymore. What I would really recommend is connecting with your customers and asking them also what would be the important certifications that I need, right? I wouldn't do a poll of 1,000 customers, but if there's one or two that you trust or you've already connected with, they could potentially give you big feedback on what would be useful inside of that process.
Excellent. There's another question here kind of talking about databases or platforms again. Someone asked the question, observing that procurement opportunities for government-based contracts are really relatively straightforward. You can go into department websites and search for those. But where do companies typically put out procurement opportunities for founders to seek out?
Well, sorry, Wendy probably knows best.
And I will defer to you, Shervin.
I was just going to say that my experience has been that you have two things that a large company will do. The first one is obviously on their own procurement portal, right? That's the first thing that they'll do. If you want to sell to Shell, right, they'll probably on the Shell portal, you'll see what are the running RFPs. The other thing is that there are large procurement portals in every country. And I speak now on an international basis. I assume that in the US, you would probably break it down to states or the regions, right, at least. And you would find central procurement places. And I think a little bit of searching will help you find those right procurement places, right? To look for, where has it been entered. I think a lot of the large companies will even advertise on their own procurement portal where they've also placed their procurement information, right? So it'll be clear and you'll be able to follow it. I mean, a little bit of research there, depending on your region.
Yeah. What I would recommend is that you register your company on the supplier portal. Most big companies have supplier portals on their websites. Put as much information as you can about what spaces you work in, because when there is an RFP or an RFI, the internal procurement team will access that database and invite hundreds of people to bid on a project that's coming up. But the trick is having, like, the more information you have in your profile, the better, because then that means you're going to be grabbed for different opportunities. So be very thorough when you are registering your company on any supplier portal.
Yeah, and if I could just add on the wonderful things that both of you have already stated, but just really understand who your customer is, really understand what's the pain point, really understand who you're going after, because many times it's not the procurement professional. Those kind of the things that we said are the things that are going to supplement you during the process, that are going to enable you to succeed during the process. But if you do not have value, if you have not identified that you would create value for that organization, it doesn't matter if you're on the portal, it doesn't matter if you've got certifications, none of that matters unless you have identified that there's a clear exchange of value that's going to happen between you and that organization. And many times that's not the procurement professional, that's somebody inside the business unit who then is going to go to procurement if that doesn't currently exist, especially given the kind of the people that are on this call, which are founders, entrepreneurs, cutting edge innovators. Many times organizations don't even know what they need, what opportunities are out there. So you're really selling, and then they're going to go to their procurement and launch the RFP. So there's definitely multiple ways and things that you can do to set yourself up for success during the process. None of it matters if you can't deliver on value to the client from the beginning.
All right. We are almost at the top of the hour. So thank you all for your wonderful questions. I'm not sure if there will be a follow-up in terms of trying to respond to all of those. I apologize we weren't able to get through all of them. I think just as a key takeaway from this conversation today, the procurement process can be a complex landscape. So do your homework and don't be afraid of no's. Get quick wins as quickly as you can, because you can build upon that. So each of the panelists, do you want to kind of give your one last minute summary before we depart?
Just going to let Daniela or Wendy go first.
No, thank you for setting this up and having me here, and for such great questions from the audience as well. I appreciate the opportunity. If you're interested in learning more about what we do at Kloopify and how we are enabling sustainability to be integrated into the procurement process, please check us out at kloopify.com. If you want to connect with me personally, my LinkedIn is in the chat, and also feel free to send us an email at Daniela@Kloopify or at info@kloopify.com. I look forward to staying connected with all of you. Best of luck.
I am happy to answer any questions or offer any guidance I may to anyone who's interested in talking to me. My information is in the chat, my LinkedIn. Shoot me a message and I'm happy to reply to you and give you any guidance you may need. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks from me as well. And I think the link for the social entrepreneurship from Microsoft is also in the chat. I can really recommend having a look at it if you're a positive impact entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur. If you're doing the right thing and you're making a business out of it, please use these programs. They're there for you.
Amazing. Well, Shannon, Shervin, Daniela, Wendy, thank you all so much for joining us to share your expertise today. As everyone is dialing into the chat, this is a great conversation, and I look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing your progress as you go along. So thank you so much. And for those of you still on, we look forward to seeing you in our future programs. So check those out in the link that we provided in the chat. Thank you again, Wendy, Daniela, Shervin, for joining us and sharing your expertise. And for those of you still on, we look forward to welcoming you online with us soon. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.